What's going on, guys? Lone Salesman here, and today we're going to talk about Dragon Age: The Veilguard. I think this one's been talked about a lot quite recently, and it gets a lot of bad press, but I am a huge Dragon Age fan. Well, I've been playing it since the beginning, since Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, and the Inquisition. It's been a long time between this game and the last game. I think it's been over 10 years since we've gotten a Dragon Age, which is quite a long time. So finally we get our Dragon Age, and what do we get? It's a continuation of what happened in Inquisition, where we learn that Solus is the Dreadwolf, kind of a bad guy. He's got his own ideas on how he wants to control the Fade or the Veil. He wants to destroy it and kind of wreak havoc. And there's a lot of backstory given in this game as to why he did most of the things he does. Whether that's important to you, that's up to you. I think they kind of took a huge gamble because, quite honestly, when I played Inquisition, before I even knew who Solus was, he was the least interesting character to me. I didn't care much for him from the beginning. The plot twist itself was interesting at the time, but I didn't think they could revolve the whole series around this one guy. Thankfully, they kind of fixed that in this. But before I get into that, if for those who don't know, basically the game continues. You disrupt the ritual in the beginning, where Solus is trying to tear down the veil, and by doing so, he releases two elven gods, Elgranon and Gillenane, which you'll hear about a lot in the series. And basically, Solus gets trapped, and you have to fight off these two gods as they amass an army of allies, of corrupt people, and anyone who's trying to gain power. But basic Dragon Age shit. It is kind of cool. I mean, it's not such. It doesn't feel like such a grand scale as Inquisition, where you're collecting assets and you're collecting different resources to build your army. In this one, there's kind of a similar system. You have your faction system, you have your companions, and those are the ways you're kind of preparing yourself for the end game. So some of the enemies you'll fight are the Venatori, the Antom, basically the Quinari. Venatori are the blood mages. You fight different spirits and demons, dark spawns, and a few other miscellaneous. Overall, I just want to start with my impressions before I get into spoilers and other things that might ruin the surprise. I thought this game, if you're a Dragon Age fan, you will probably enjoy it. If you're new to the series, it's a more accessible. If you're a casual gamer, I would say it's kind of an accessible way to get into the series. Anyone who's kind of interested in RPGs might like this kind of game, and the progression and fighting is actually kind of fun, depending what you play and how you build your character. But it's not maybe as in depth as its previous iterations, like the first two games, or mostly one in Inquisition, where you kind of had a little bit more. It's more of a classic RPG, whereas this one's more of a action RPG. If you've ever played Mass Effect as well, it's kind of going off those combat mechanics, priming and detonating, setting up combos and stuff like that, different weaknesses. It's actually strikingly similar. Inquisition had a few things about that, like with the armor and barrier system, but honestly, it is quite different. It's more relying on your flexibility. You can easily take down higher level enemies with good mechanics, good if you know, like dodging and whatnot. Whereas in Inquisition, it was more, I would say, strategy based. So you had to be very careful on how you took down certain battles, especially fighting like higher level enemies and dragons later on. In this one, I was fighting bosses that were maybe 10 levels higher than me at the underdog level, which is like the second hardest difficulty. But I digress. Let me just say that I would give it a solid, I don't know, if I had to rate it a 7 or 8 out of 7 out of 10. It's not a bad game. And despite your political beliefs and all that, some of the writing can feel off. I had to take a lot of breaks. I didn't play it a lot, and I took a lot of like sessions, longer sessions, but there were times where I took a few days, didn't play it, just let life happen, and I went back to it and it felt fresh again. Sometimes if you play through it a little bit too much in too many sessions, it feels a bit stale. But I'll get into that a little bit more. So overall, I would recommend it if you're a Dragon Age fan. You won't be that disappointed if you really are a fan. I've seen a lot of people be critical about it. I don't think it's that serious, but I could see why. So first off, let me just get into the companions. You have Tosh, Darvin, Emmerich, Valara, Nev, Harding, and Lucanus. They're kind of different characters that you haven't seen before, honestly. You've seen Harding, obviously, but it's a little interesting to see the way they've characterized some of these people. So Tosh is, I guess, a trans Qunari with identity issues. She's a dragon hunter. She also has a dragon abilities. She's fighting between if she wants to be Ravani or with the Qun, with her mother. So basically her whole thing is, she's a tough badass who, knows dragon hunting and also is compassionate towards them. She can be a bit brutish, but also kind of kind. A lot of people hated this character. I don't think she's as bad as everyone says she is. There are some issues in how she comes off when you first meet her, but overall she's not that bad. Then there's Darvin. He's more of a classic, I think, Dragon Age character. He's a straight up Grey Warden, no nonsense guy. He has a pet griffin who also becomes your companion. The griffin's name is Asan, who also kind of he's not just like a cameo griffin. So the griffins actually play a huge part in the story. If you actually play through the Grey Warden and Darvin's story, basically the griffins are kind of an extinct animal, and then they come back. Darvin's been training up the baby ones. He's kind of a cool character. I really liked him. He's an elf too, so but he's more of a classic sword and shield warrior. Then you have Emmerich, who's a necromancer. He kind of looks like Vincent Price. He's got a really cool backstory on, necromancy and his little pet, Manfred, and his goals to become a lich, which you'll get to decide later. Then there's Valara. She's regular kind of elf veil jumper who's kind of a geek with gadgets. She's everyone's a romance option, by the way. I picked her because she seemed the most, compatible, but honestly, the romance in this game is not quite like how it used to be in Dragon Age or Mass Effect. They kind of really dropped the ball. There's no real connection. I mean, yes, there's dialogue options and changes a few minor things in the story. So depending who you romance, other characters might get together or they might not, depending how much you progress their story or who you pick. So in my playthrough, Lucanus and Nev got together, and then Harding and Tosh got together, which was a little interesting. So anyway, she's pretty cool. She's a mage. She's a mage, and she fights mostly electricity. She uses a unique weapon I've never seen before. She uses like a magical bow, which you don't get to use, but I guess that's just her unique thing. Then there's Nev. She's a Minrathous detective ice mage. She's kind of a cool noir aspect to her. She's also kind of a hardened woman. She's got a peg leg for some reason, which they never really bring up. There is a choice later on with her character and Lucanus where you have to decide which city to save, and either one, it can really affect their relationship with you. Then there's Harding. If you guys didn't play Inquisition, she's basically a dwarf scout. She's plays kind of a minor role in that game. She kind of gives you a lay of the land every time you discover a new area, which is kind of cool. So it was interesting to see them bring back like a character like that. I kind of enjoyed that. Then Lucanus, he's a Antivan Crow. He's also got a demon who's possessed him, and he's kind of fighting between the two a lot, or they're fighting for control. And you try to find out like why why he possessed him and what promise he made. The mission you actually get him in is a really cool mission. You get to save him from a underwater prison. So there's a lot of cool set pieces and areas. The problem is, I guess, is going back to those enemies I mentioned. So you get the Venatori, which are blood mages. They mostly have mages, some warriors and assassin type. The Antom Kunari, they also have these really annoying fire gunners, shield guys, and giant reavers, which are just really annoying early game. You got spirits and demons that come in different forms. Then you have the Darkspawn, which I personally didn't like their design that much. Their redesign, they look a little cartoonish. I kind of prefer the original design from before, but it's not that bad. They look okay. Same thing with the spirits and demons. They kind of make the pride demon look a little weird, too, a little wiry. I don't know how to explain it, but everything looks a little off. But I guess they're going for a new look. I mean, it's crazy to think that it's been 10 years since there's been an actual Dragon Age game. It feels like it's been so long. So overall, I think with this game, it also takes a Mass Effect 2 route of how important it is to level up your companions and get through their stories and do their side missions. It's kind of what determines, how well they'll do in the very last mission. So again, spoiler warnings. Because from here on out, before I get into spoilers and stuff, I just want to talk about the other stuff like items and skills. So basically, the way you're going to level up your character is regular combat, doing quests, and you get a giant constellation style of skills. So you can. It's really cool. This I picked mage this time around, so there's a few different specializations you can go for. I went for the kind of the crow, dagger, and orb route. I really enjoyed that fighting style. It was really fun. You can also, so every class gets 2 different weapons. So for mage, it's staff and dagger and orb. So I really enjoyed those. And there's really some cool combos you can do. So I picked like lightning, fire, and then there's a lot of cool combos you can get for like for example, I had a dagger that could make these arcane bombs. Every time I detonated that, it would do a critical hit. So depending how you play is how you can build your character. You can stack a bunch of afflictions. You can go for detonations and primers. So basically, there's a few different afflictions you can do, like necrosis, flame, shock, bleed. And then on top of that, there's weakened, overwhelmed, and sunder. So those last 3 are mainly afflicted by abilities, and then you can do follow-up attacks to detonate and create a combo using the afflictions itself. Those are mostly for just like damage over time. I enjoyed the combat system for what it was. It does get a little stale sometimes, and it does feel a little tanky when you're fighting on harder difficulties. But if you get the right abilities and scale into the right things, you could really do a lot. And then the gear itself has different, so you can have a headpiece, an armor, a few rings, a necklace, stuff like that to really add different attributes. You can do like advantages, like a lot of passives. So I found that this game, to really make your character good, is finding the right passives that fit your play style. So for example, in my sense, I'm using a character that uses high stagger. When you do stagger damage, you can eventually do takedown. So I was doing high critical and high stagger, and then also doing takedown damage. So if I got them staggered enough, I could do faster takedowns. This is really helpful when I was fighting enemies like dragons or big bosses. really helps when you knock them down. You can get a lot of bonus damage and crits, so it really helped. It kind of felt like sometimes where the companions don't do as much damage as you want them to. You honestly have to be always managing their abilities and who they're attacking. So there's actually some passive abilities that only activate when you ask them to target certain enemies, and then it'll add like an effect. So if I asked like Tosh to target a certain enemy, she could apply burning, or maybe if an enemy's targeting Darwin, it can activate taunt, for example. So combat at a glance seemed like it kind of got dumbed down, but actually if you get into it, you can have some fun building different combinations and figuring out what works for you. So for example, sometimes I liked having Darwin on my team. I would have him use taunt, and then I would use Harding to apply Sunder. I had an ability that would always activate the Sunder ability and then just do the combo, and then I throw like a lightning storm to help knock them down. So like just different things. It's kind of fun. And then you also get a dagger that has runes. So those are additional passives you can activate during the battle. That you can add like shock or position or penetrate, little things like that. Or you can also do an ultimate move which does massive damage to your enemy depending on the type. The one little annoying thing about the enemies is they all have different weaknesses and resistances. So let's say you like really using lightning. Well, if you're fighting the Ontom, it's pretty much ineffective against them. So I found that sometimes if you're at a high enough level or doing enough damage or crit, it doesn't really matter. But at lower levels, you can really feel it. And to get past some bosses, it was actually very helpful to just use the vulnerability, especially when you're doing the crossroads sub bosses. That was very kind of a difficult thing I did early game, but something you can do later on, of course, too. It felt a lot more action oriented and less strategy. You have like different blocking and dodge mechanics. So like it feels like the mage, I was just always like warping around and dodging stuff more so than actually applying barrier to protect my team. Or I didn't feel that squishy. And then of course there's still the potions, so you can find healing pots all over the place to heal yourself, which kind of is a little weird. I mean, you're in the middle of this, some places it's just weird seeing the potion pots. You'll see when you play, but overall, like the combat, I had some gripes about it at first, but I did get into it. So I think if you enjoy the combat, you'll be able to get to the game much faster. So that's the gist of the items and skills. And then now that I've talked about that, I kind of want to get into the faction system. So the factions is kind of what replaces the war table from Inquisition. So before, you had the war table where you would manage your resources, you would do little side missions, and sometimes accept or make decisions on certain things. So you would send your advisors to go do certain things, and it would give you rewards. There's no more of that. It's more so you're just doing quests and side quests for these big factions. So you have the Morn Watch, the Antivan Crows, the Grey Wardens, Shadow Dragons, Lords of Fortune, and the Veil Jumpers. So fair warning, this is what happened to me early game. There is a decision you have to make that makes you choose between two cities that you have to save, and depending on that choice can affect your affiliation with this faction. It makes it very difficult to max them out later on. From when I did it, I tried to 100% everything, do all the quests, and I still wasn't able to level up a certain faction because of my choice later on, which was kind of annoying. I actually didn't mind the system so much. The only really perplexing thing is there is a system where you can sell certain items to the faction to get more favor. Honestly, I didn't see this as a value too much. On half the time, I was just trying to offload my goal. It felt too time consuming to go and pick an item for each faction. That part. If you're already doing most of the missions anyway, it doesn't make much of a difference. Like, for example, Lords of Fortune, you get most of your faction points from either fighting in the pit or just fighting dragons. So if you're just doing the normal game, you'll get most of that. Same thing with the Morn Watch. There's different missions where you have to go fight ghosts. There's special ghosts you can fight. That will also give you a lot of points. Crows, that one's a bit slower. There's more of a story aspect to that, as well as Shadow Dragons. Same thing with the Grey Warden. There's a lot of side quests you can do, along with the Veil Jumpers. That's actually even part of the main story. You end up helping them anyway. So overall, the faction system felt a little like in Inquisition. It did feel kind of like a chore to manage the war table sometimes. Though it was cool. It does feel a little bit more natural progression, especially going through the game. The more you do for these factions, the more they'll help you in the very end. So my other major gripes is you can't play as companions, so you're only in control of your character at all times. Now, this felt like kind of a major step back from what I was used to in the other games, but at the same time, I did get kind of used to it as well. It did feel a little less fun sometimes because there's no way for you to switch from the so like, since I played only a mage, there was no chance for me to ever try out like a different class. So, that was one thing I always liked about the other Dragon Age games. You could always, maybe you felt like playing a warrior, you could switch off to Inquisition, you could switch off the Black Wall or Cassandra or the Bull. You could try different classes and just see like, oh, okay, this is what it would be like if I picked this. So in this, there's a little less replayability, but maybe it adds more replayability, I guess. So now you can go back and try a different class. But to be honest, this game did feel like a lot to go through on one playthrough. So like going back to the factions, like, if you really want to do everything, and I mean everything, not only do the factions, but go to the crossroads, do all the memories of Solus. You can figure out more backstory, do some more stuff for a cameo character you meet earlier on, Morgan. She does show up. But again, going back to that early decision, if you don't know, so when you go get Darwin for the first time, they spring this decision on you, like, hey, you gotta pick a city to save. There can only be one. So it's either Docktown, Minrathous, or the Antivan city where the crows live, Treviso. And you have no time to go back. You have to make the decision right there and then, which was kind of a cool thing at the time. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is totally surprising. Like, you felt like you had control, but then all of a sudden, in the long run, though, it's what prevented me from maxing out the Shadow Dragons. I did all their quests, but maybe I just didn't sell enough items to them in the beginning, so I wasn't able to max out their faction, which kind of sucked, but it didn't really matter to me because honestly, I didn't care so much about them that much anyway. So just going into like a little bit more of a spoiler territory, I did talk about the game. Again, I do recommend if you're a Dragon Age fan, if you're just a general RPG person, you might like it. Maybe if you don't like certain political things, might not be for you. I didn't think it was that bad. So off into spoilers. If you do the epilogue of the game, so after you finally kill Algernon, you can confront Solus. Mythal is the lady he used to kind of look up to, or that they were kind of like lovers at one point. She kind of betrayed him. Her essence is in Morgan, and she shows you a way to get her favor. So you can either fight Mythal straight up, or you can convince her to give you her essence that'll help you in the end of the game. There also gets you a secret rune that really helps, that gives you like pretty much every buff in the game, all at once when you activate it with the dagger. So that was a really good ability when fighting the last boss, because he is kind of annoying. Yeah, the ending itself was very epic. You see Fenriel, you see Solus like fighting the archdemon. There's a lot of other little epic moments in the game. Really cool set pieces. The battle at Wipes Out. Even like the early game, it's pretty fun. It does feel a little on rails at some points. It's like, okay, we're just going through the motions, but I did like where it was going. It did feel like a big step into nowhere, though, as far as progressing the overall Dragon Age story. As much as they tried to make this as big scale as it was, I didn't quite feel it. So, the Inquisitor shows up, and he's telling you about how much he's helping you and all this stuff, and it just felt, I don't know, it didn't feel as big as it should have been until the very end, when or like, so during the Battle of Wipes Out, when you're fighting the Darkspawn, fighting the Archdemon, and at the very end, it does feel very big and climactic. The middle parts of the game, not so much. The big set pieces with every major plot point, which I guess it should feel like, but it just felt these other moments didn't feel as good. With the companion stories, they do add some bigger players you have to fight. That also felt like a chore sometimes too. It's like, it just felt like there was too many missions where I had to go talk to someone, and we'd go walk around, collect this, collect that. I mean, these missions were more so for you to get to know the characters, which is fine. It's just, it felt a bit pointless at times, or it just felt like there's some stuff that could have been cut out. Like, I know people appreciate content, but I would appreciate it a little less in some parts, which is fine. There's some really cool like moments though, like Emmerich, for example. He, when you complete his story, you get to decide if he becomes a lich. And I was just wondering to myself, does he actually change his appearance? And yes, he actually does. And towards the end of the game, in some cutscenes, you actually do get to see him in this lich form. So it is really cool to see that some of your decisions do make an impact. Lucanus, some of the other ones, not so much. I mean, Harding, you can teach her to be, her whole story with her connection to the Titans, which is kind of interesting. It just didn't feel like much. Same thing with Lucanus, you can ask him to kind of make do with the guy who betrays him, Alario, and I don't know, it didn't feel like much. I mean, you do see him in the end too, but there is a really cool decision from the beginning of the game. When you go to the city, I forgot the name of the town, but basically there's the mayor of this town that gives up his town to the gods, and it results in the whole town being murdered. And you have a choice to either kill him or give him to the Grey Wardens. And I chose to send him to the Grey Wardens, and everyone was kind of pissed, but it was really cool because he does show up, he does affect some quests, and you do see him in the battle. So there is some cool decisions that do actually make a difference, like picking Treviso over Minrathous. I chose Treviso in this case. It did change the way Nev acted for a very long time. There's large chunk of the game where she's just not there. Also, she loses the ability to heal, and it does make her abilities hit harder too. So it's a lot of interesting little choices they made. I do like the choice system, I guess. Did feel like some things did make an impact. The conversation system, not so much. Sometimes I just did not want to listen to what they were talking about, or just felt like what I was saying didn't really matter anyway. In some cases, what you do say can affect the approval of different characters, though. So you do want to be careful, I guess, if you do want to gain the approval of certain people. But getting approval is very easy. Just using characters, bringing them on missions will increase their bond and get you help with getting those later missions. So at the very end, I'm glad to be done with all this Elven God nonsense. No more Solus, no more Elgranon Gillenay, no more Avenurus. They kind of made that clear. But now, I guess there's some mystery society that's been controlling things along. They show you an epilogue of these guys in white from, the first game. They're whispering in the ears of the first warden, and then the guy, Varric's brother in the second game, and then, they're also whispering to Flemeth and a few others, and the guy from Inquisition, Corypheus, and I'm just like, okay, well, who are these guys? I mean, there's been no mention of them. They kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's the circle. I mean, they keep mentioning something about the circle, so maybe it is like the circle of mages or something. They do kind of mention it here and there, in the game, when you're in Minthrathis, which is kind of cool because it would bring you back to like the original Dragon Age, like those mages, that order. You haven't really seen them since then, but it would have been nice to see the Templars come back too. I do miss kind of the Chantry and Mage versus Templar deal, but in this, you're in Tevinter, so there's not much Chantry to go around. I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. I don't know if it's gonna be another 10 years till we get another Dragon Age. This one felt really late, and it didn't do much for the series getting people interested, especially with like, Baldur's Gate, how well that game did, and then releasing this game the way it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game is epic. There's really cool moments, and the combat can be fun, but I don't think it did a very good job attracting new people to the series. I don't know, maybe it's going for a certain audience. Maybe it worked in that aspect. I do see some people who were excited to play it outside of, normal people, I think, who would play it. So it does have a chance. Tell me what you think of Dragon Age Veilguard. I played just as much as I could about it. I don't think I'll replay it again. Probably still go back and play Origin or even Inquisition if I really had to make a choice. Maybe I'll feel different later on. Maybe if I want to play a different class or something, I don't know. All I know is Veilguard was a pretty decent entry in the series, but if they make another game like this, it's probably going to kill the series. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Mass Effect. The game itself looked really good, graphics wise, and they had a lot of epic moments, but I think they couldn't do and improve the writing and interest of what's going on. Mass Effect is going to be a huge game. I hope they just take a better direction of how they want to do the story. Same thing with the next Dragon Age series. Okay, they want to talk about this circle, this Illuminati type group. Fine. Just make it a little bit more interesting. But again, some of the choices you do make a huge difference. So I had a lot of fun. Don't think I'll come back to it anytime soon, but would I say it's worth it? I would say if you're not a huge fan, you can get it on sale. Otherwise, if you are a fan, you probably already own it. If you're still having second thoughts, again, I would just wait for a sale. There's no DLC with this one. There's no need for any deluxe package, because honestly, there's so many items in the game to decorate yourself with, appearance wise, so I feel like it's not really necessary to do that. Just get the normal game, you'll be fine. Anyway, that's all I have. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.